Hi friends, it's Terry Stewart, independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator located in the U.S. in Central Maryland. So welcome to our August 2025 Woohoo Weekend. This is a fun event where we share projects as well as tips and tricks. My project features a watercolor technique that I think you're going to love, and I'm really happy to be sharing it with you. So let's get started. So this is the stamp set I'll be using today for my technique card. It's Layered Thoughts. I love these bold greetings and sentiments, and the fact that you can mix and match. Like thank you, thinking of you, happy birthday to you. So there's a lot of variety, and main ones that I have been using with this main sentiments I've been using is the happy birthday, thank you, and today we're going to be using thinking of you. And probably I can use the love when Valentine's rolls around. So let me show you what my card looks like, my technique card. And it is Watercolor Emboss Resist. So what I've done is emboss this thinking of you, embossed with black embossing powder, and then I did a watercolor wash over it. So I think you're really going to like this technique. It looks maybe too, how should I phrase this? It looks like it's complicated and takes a lot of time, and it really doesn't. It goes really quick. So let me take my stamp set aside and bring in the ingredients I'm using today. And I'm going to post, well actually if you're attending this event, you've been invited by your demonstrator, and there's a PDF that goes along with this event that will have all the supplies listed, cutting measurements, along with photos, a project photo as well as a close-up photo. So get with the demonstrator who invited you to this Woohoo Weekend and ask for the PDF. So I have a half a sheet of strawberry slush. I've got a piece of basic white, which was for the inside. The same size cut is basic black, and this is cut at 3 1/4 by 5 inches. My metric friends, yeah, I'll have to get back to you on that. And then I have a piece of watercolor paper. Now this comes in imperial sized 5 by 7. So what I have done is cut it on the long side at 3 1/2 inches. Metric friends, everything is sized to this, and what is going to happen is your paper is probably the same width, but it'll be longer, and I will explain later on some ways you can get around to hide the fact that you're not going to have an equal border at the side, the top and bottom, as the same width as the sides. So you'll have more space at the top and the bottom if you're in metric. And I can talk about that later, about how you might do some things differently. So we're going to start, I'm going to put these aside, and we're going to start with our embossing. A heat embossing, I should say. So I've already put my stamps on my block, and this block is number E, and you can see it'll just fit in here. I will bring in my Additions embossing kit, and this is an online exclusive. It comes with the tray, tweezers, brush, and the embossing buddy. So the other thing I'm going to be using is my silicone mat, so let's put that down here. And Versamark, because we're heat embossing. So here is my Versamark for heat embossing. And Versamark is a thick ink. It's not water-based, so it just takes an extra second or two. Well, actually it takes probably a minute or so for it to dry out, so it gives you plenty of time to put your embossing powder on it. So I'm taking my pad to my stamp, just because the stamp is bigger than the pad, so this just is easier for me to manage. And I think a lot of you will find that taking the ink pad to the stamp is easier. So now I'm going to center this, and actually I'm going to go a little above center because I want to tie on some baker's twine at the bottom of my card. So if I move my stamp up just a bit, that will give me extra room for that baker's twine. Now I am pressing this and holding it because it is a thick ink and I want it to transfer to my watercolor paper. And then when you lift this off, you really cannot see the ink because it is clear. It's a watermark ink. I'm going to bring in my black embossing powder. Now this is old packaging. We now have the Wow embossing powders, and I'm looking forward to acquiring those because it has such fine crystals that it covers so well, is what I've been told. And yeah, so once I use up the majority of my black embossing powder, that's my go-to. So I'm using my tray. I'm going to try to get as much as I can back into my container. Oh, and I forgot a step. I wanted to use my embossing buddy to avoid, I don't know if you can see, there's some extraneous powder, and if I don't get rid of that before I heat emboss, it will stay there forever. It'll melt in. So let me bring in my brush, and this is why you have a embossing buddy, so you don't have this issue. Yeah, I meant to use my embossing buddy because it is my friend. I missed a little bit down here where we can come back, redo that, and then I'm just going to try to flick it as much as possible, use my brush to get all the extra powder off, and boy am I regretting not using my embossing buddy. Yeah, so okay, I think that's going to work. And let me bring in my heat tool. Grab my tweezers, my reverse tweezers, and I'll hold this. And here is my heat tool. I'm going to put it, it has 2 gears, and I am going to put it on the highest gear, and then hold it over my, oh, see a little, now we'll heat it, and I'm going to be close to my embossing powder but not touching it. Move it around, and once you see that the powder has melted, move on and just keep moving your tool so you don't stay in one spot. If you stay in one spot for too long, you could burn the powder, and then what happens, it flakes off and the emboss resist doesn't work. So carefully melt your embossing powder, and then I think I've got it. Everything is shining. You can't see any powder. And that looks great. So to clean up my powder, I'm just going to shake it down here into the corner and back into my container. So this powder will go a long way. And that's why I've had this one so long. But I think it's time to get the Wow, so I can enjoy the coverage it provides. Great, so put this away. Put all my tools back in here. And my beloved embossing buddy that I forgot to use. I'm going to set my piece aside for a minute and let it dry. It dries very quickly, but I did want to show you how I clean my photopolymer stamp when I use Versamark. because Versamark, you need something sudsy. So I have my Stampin' Mist here, and I'm going to spray that right onto my photopolymer stamp, and then on the wet side of my Stampin' Scrub, I'm going to clean my stamp off, and that will remove any Versamark. Okay, so now we are ready to proceed with our watercolor. Let me get it in. I'm going to bring in some scrap paper and put this down. And I have my silicone mat here. I'm using 3 colors to create this background, this watercolor background. And these are 3 ink colors: Darling Duck, Timid Tiger, and Strawberry Slush. So I'm going to place ink from these pads onto my silicone mat. And the order I'm going to do them in is the rainbow order. I don't know if you remember way back when in elementary school, Roy G. Biv tells you the order of the rainbow. So for R is red, O is orange, and yellow is Y. Roy, R-O-Y. So that's the order I'm going to put them down on my mat. So I'm going to open my ink pad. I'm going to take a block. Now you can do this directly to your silicone mat, drag it across. They're just so bulky though. I find it easier to use a block. You could use a dauber, a blending brush, or even the re-inkers. And right now, during August 2025, you can purchase the ink colors inks for 15% off. It's a special that Stampin' Up! Has going in August 2025. Now I'm just going to go to my chamois, which is off camera, and wipe off this ink. It is water-based ink, so it's very simple to clean up. And now Timid Tiger. We're going to put that right down the middle. So ink it up, put the ink block right onto the ink, and then lay down that ink. And again, right to my chamois, and to remove the ink. So there we go. And next is our Darling Duck. Darling Duckling. Ooh, that's a mouthful. Darling Duckling. Okay. And get some ink on there. And then put that down. Alright. And then again on my chamois. And we're done with that block. Cleanup is easy. And now, this is where the magic happens. So we have the spritzer that I filled with water right out of the tap. I'm going to spray it right onto my silicone mat. And just let those colors kind of meld and blend so you can't tell that it was a block that put them down. There we go. So next, I'm going to take my panel that I did the heat embossing, and I'm going to set it down into this water, and then kind of push the water that's underneath around, just like so, and then let it sit here, maybe for, I don't know, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and you can peek at it to see how it looks. There we go. And you can also tilt it and let it run. You can take paper napkin here, and I'm going to kind of sop up if there's any runs on the edge or it builds up. Just wipe that off. And here around the word U, it seems to be building up, so I can just dab that a little bit and get rid of that. So I'm going to set this down. It does curl up, but it will flatten out. And then I'm going to use my paper towels and napkins to wipe this up. Like so. And I'll throw that in my trash. And then using my spritzer, I'm just going to spritz. This is a cleanup. I can take it to the sink and wash it right off. That ink will come right off because it is water-based. And that's how simple it is to clean up. Now the silicone mat, the spritzer are all available as online exclusives, as well as that embossing editions kit. So set this down. It will relax as it dries, but you can help it along by putting a block, maybe an ink pad on the end to hold it down. So that's one way of drying it. Now, it will dry within, I think you could probably, less than a half hour, this will be dry enough to work on. I have created another one, similar. You will see that each background will differ depending on how much ink you put on, how much water, how much you push the watercolor paper into the ink, you know, that you've watered. So each one will be different. So I'm just going to use this one. I did this ahead of time. So move all this to the side and let it dry. So this one you can see is pretty flat already. And I'll just leave it on my silicone mat and put it to the side. And I will put my scrap paper to the side also. I will be doing a brief catalog tour once my presentation is done. If you would like to see where all the items you can find are in the catalog, stick around. Okay, so let's bring back, well, before we do that, when I cut my fluid water paper, it comes, I said, in 5 by 7, and I cut it on the long side at 3.5. So it's a little bit longer than, actually it's the same size as my mat. So I want to take off 1/4 inch. So it's really my decision, or what your preference is, whether you take it off the top, or you take it across the bottom, or you split the difference. So here is my paper trimmer, and I think what I'm going to do, since there's some white that the ink didn't get all, you can see the watercolor paper through, I'm going to take my 1/4 inch off the bottom. So I'm laying my watercolor paper in here. I'm measuring to the right side at 1/4 inch, and then we can remove that. Okay. And now we are ready to assemble. So I'm going to adhere my watercolor panel to my basic black cardstock. And because it is a little bit curved, even though it's dry, I am going to be using my tear and tape. I just find that it's got a stronger hold, and it can keep the panel flat. I'll adhere it flat to my cardstock layer. So I'm getting kind of close to the edge of my panel and then just tearing it near the edge. And I will do the top and the bottom, and then I'm going to do a strip right down the middle just to make sure that it is completely flat on my panel. And if you take your bone folder and go over that release paper and burnish it, it helps it release. So with my take your pick tool, I'm going to pull up that release paper and then about halfway fold it out. I'm going to do that for all 4 sides, and this just helps when you're placing it, so you have some leeway. If it doesn't go well the first time, you haven't committed fully by having these little release papers but half of them, half the adhesive is hidden. And I just push it down with my finger to bend it, and then that one in the center is going to come off. And move this up a bit. Oops, it's pushing my nameplate out of the way. So if you center on the layer, you got three sides. The top, the sides are equal, then the rest of it will also be equal. And then once you have it down, give it a good press so the center strip is holding it, and then you can pull these out, the rest of the release papers, and give it a little bit of burnish with your finger. And now that panel is securely adhered to my cardstock layer. We can throw these release papers away and bring in the remaining parts of her card. So again, my strawberry slush, this is a half sheet of cardstock, scored in half, cut in half, and then scored in half. And that's how we make our card bases. And I'm going to place inside this white cardstock, basic white, and that's cut at 3 3/4 by 5. My metric friends, that would be 3 3/4 by 5 would be, I believe, 9.5 by 13.9. But again, refer to that PDF that your demonstrator who invited you can provide. There we go. Now before I adhere this panel, I did want to add my baker's twine. Oh, and I was going to tell you about some alternatives for my metric friends. You can cut the same height, the same, so as I said, it was 9.5 this way. You could make it 10.5 and go all the way to the edges of the card front. So your black base would come all the way to the edges, and then place that in the center. That's one idea. The other idea is to leave it this size, which is 9.5 by 13.9, and just put it towards the top of your base, and you'll have more room down here. Maybe you can add some extra embellishments, but there are some ideas for you to overcome, because your watercolor paper is going to be the same size as the Imperial, which does not correspond to the metric. I know, very confusing. It's metric paper stock, cardstock comes in different sizes than Imperial, right? Did you know that? It's true. So you will have to think about how you want your card to look and adjust your matting accordingly. So before we mat this though, I did want to put on my black baker's twine, and this is why I stamped it towards the top, so I would have more room down here at the bottom. And I normally cut off the spool, but I think this baker's twine, I'm just going to cut it and hope for the best that we can get a nice bow. And if you can't get a nice bow, well then just tie a knot. That works the majority of the time. So let's get this even, and I have to come one time more around. There we go. And let's see if I can tie a bow the first time. Loop it around and then pull it through. And it does not look good the first time. Oh, because it came undone. Okay, there we go. Tie a bow. Okay, and then we're gonna tighten this bow up a little bit, mess with it a little bit. And I like the bow more to the left, so I'm going to slide it over. Pull that a little tighter. Okay. And I think I'm going to secure that with a glue dot, the bow, just so it stays where I want it to stay. So let me bring my take your pick tool, and I'm going to take this glue dot and kind of roll it up into a little ball, and then stick it under my bow, right like so. There we go. Alright, so that looks nice. Now we can adhere this panel, and I'm just using my liquid glue because now that the watercolor panel is adhered, it's not going to roll up. So we can go back to my usual adhesive, and I'm just going to use some liquid glue and center this onto my card base. Push that down, give it a little pat so that glue can activate and adhere my panel. I'm going to trim these tails from my baker's twine. Alright, oh, one last thing is I want to add some embellishments. So these are in color flat pearls, 2025 to 2027. They also are on sale in the month of August. So get with your demonstrator if you're interested in these in color products. Now I'm going to use, so here's the Strawberry Slush, Darling Duckling, and Timid Tiger. And I think I'm going to go with Strawberry Slush. So I'll take a big pearl, put that up here, a medium-sized pearl next to it, and then I'll take a little one down here, I think right here, right in the center. You like things in a triangle, so I think I will put it right there. And that is the embossed resist technique with watercolor. What do you think? Pretty nifty, right? I think so. Alright, and I promised to do a catalog tour real quick. So here is the annual catalog, May 2025 to April 26. On page 34, that's where you find the Layered Thoughts stamp set we talked about. And then moving on to page 102 is the heat tool, and the question here is, can you use a hairdryer for embossing? Don't, because hair dryers are not hot enough. You really need to have a heat tool which gets like 400 degrees, very hot. For you metric people, that's Celsius, that's over 212. It's over boiling. It's very Celsius. It's very hot, very hot. And so that was page 102, and then we're going to move on to page 111. Here are the blocks, and I used the block B to put the ink onto my silicone pad, and block, let's see what block this is. Okay, I used block B to put the ink on my silicone pad, and block B for the ink, E for the stamp. Oh boy. Okay, and down here is the stamping mist cleaner that I used on my stamp to remove the Versamark. On page 113, this is where the tear and tape adhesive that I used on my panel so that it would not warp once I placed it on my mat. And then on page 115, we have the fluid watercolor paper. They do come 5 by 7, and there are 10 sheets of them. And next is page 125, and this is where we have the in color flat pearls that I used, which are on sale, 15% off. And on page 127, at the bottom is the Baker's Twine Essentials Pack, and there's the black Baker's Twine that I used on my project. And then on page 131, that's the Versamark that you need for heat embossing. And again, the stamp, oh, that stays on cleaner. You don't need that. You just need regular Stampin' Mist to clean Versamark. And then on page 133, right here is the Wow embossing powders, and I use the black, which is in the basics collection. And then if we go to page 137, here are the ink colors that are on sale for the month of August. I use the Strawberry Slush cardstock, ink pad, the Timid Tiger ink pad, and the Darling Duckling ink pad. And there you have it. And there you have it, the Watercolor Emboss Resist. I hope you enjoy the rest of the Woohoo Weekend event. Get with the demonstrator who invited you to request the PDF that she has of all the projects that's being shown during this event. Like and subscribe to my YouTube channel so I can bring you even more fun stamping projects. And until next time, remember, stamping is fun. Bye.